We're so toxic, can't get enough. Ooh, I'll go and say it like a mantra. You know what you want, do ya? Oh, hell no, I won't plead the monster, no matter what you tell yourself. I should have known that we could.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Planet Sport. We've had a bit of a break. Obviously the sunshine's been out. I've been getting my tan. I don't know whether you can see, but I have a really bad tan line on my arm. I basically look like one of those ridiculous drums.
Yeah, me too.
There you go. See, we're all there. We can't quite. It's a bit bright in your room, to be honest. But obviously we are back and we're here for we're not here physically, but we're going to be on Zoom for the next 4 episodes again until we can move into our new studio at Media City. Woo woo.
Whoop.
Very excited. But obviously today, Premier League. We're going to focus on the Premier League. And obviously we're on the last weekend now. And we've obviously found out, or pretty much found out, who's going to go down, all that sort of jazz. And obviously which teams are going to be sort of in and around the Champions League. But obviously we're going to be doing something a little bit. So we're going to do something a little bit different for this episode. And because we're going to have such a big focus on the Premier League, we have each got a little 20-second sort of headline sporting topics. So Sam's going to start us. So take us through the headlines. Take us through the sporting headlines.
Mike Tyson will return to the ring later this year. He's facing Roy Jones Jr. in an 8-round exhibition fight in LA on September the 12th. The former heavyweight world champion and legend of the sport will be making his return to the ring wearing head guards and larger than normal gloves against Jones Jr., who is a former 4-weight world champion and last fought in 2018, which was his 75th professional fight.
And Chelsea midfielder Mason Mount has claimed that his teammate Tammy Abraham could have had a chance as an NBA player. Mount joined Sky Sports NBA and was asked which player he thought has the credentials to make it as a player in the NBA. He said he is tall and is into basketball, so I think maybe he could be okay.
Now, it's also been reported that the cost of postponing the 2020 Tokyo Olympic Games due to the coronavirus pandemic could be in the region of about £5 billion, according to Kansai University in Japan. Now, whilst the economic impact of it isn't known, Professor Emeritus Katsuhiro Miyamoto at Kensei University believes it will be significant. And this is due to things like, maintaining the athletes' village and stadiums for an extra year, as well as hosting new qualifying events. I actually stayed at the old Olympic Village 4 years ago, and even then it was just very normal. So what it's going to be like now, I don't know. It might need some work. It was quite nice when I went there, but it was very basic. So. It was a hostel at the end of the day, sort of a youth hostel place. So, make of it what you will. But of course, now those are the headlines. I can see you all smiling about my botched Japanese pronunciation there. The name for Emeritus isn't a Japanese name. It kind of threw me off. So yeah, sorry about that. But of course, we will move on to the Premier League and. Quite an entertaining Premier League end to the season, I guess. We'll touch on the the Championship a little bit later as well, because obviously that final day was just absolutely mental. Best league in the world for me, so competitive. But we'll talk about the Premier League first. Interesting video that was sort of surfacing around on Twitter. Frank Lampard and Jurgen Klopp, not the best of friends by the looks of things. They had quite a heated argument on the touchline. I think Frank Lampard was shouting many expletives at the Liverpool bench. I think he said something along the lines of, you win one Premier League trophy and you think you're big guys or whatever. Something around that. So I mean, what do we think? Is it pettiness? Is it just rivalries? Is Lampard salty? Is it cry rivals? You know, that sort of. What sort of stance have we got on this?
I
Stop
like it.
crying. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say I like it. It's it's fun. I mean, listen, when did football have to be boring and everyone had to get on? You know, the days when people get on a football pitch when they're supposed to be rivals is the day I think football has completely lost its way. Yeah, it's a bit salty. It's a bit, you know, Mbappe crying gif, but it's at the end of the day, they both are elite level football managers who are both trying to win a football match. If the emotions spill over, then the emotions spill over. They just have to, you know, who handles it better. And clearly, I think Klopp did, given that they came away with the victory.
I mean, I think stop crying Frank Lampard is all that can be said. I mean, I've seen the video and it's quite funny. I don't think it's really done in like a really hatred way. I mean, it's a bit of fun, and I think it's just them having a bit of banter, bit of an argument on the sideline. I mean, Klopp seems to sort of come over to him, and I think he's just like, just mate, sort of thing.
Saw quite a few of the Liverpool players on the bench like laughing about
Yeah.
it. I mean, do you think that Liverpool are getting a bit too carried away with themselves? Because let's you know, many fans have said this, but they have the same amount of Premier League titles as Blackburn and Leicester. So,
yeah, I mean, it is a bit odd. Like they're getting this like guard of honor like every match and all this, but then again, they've won the Premier League so much earlier than, you know, many other years. So, you know, they kind of deserve it. They've done well. It's been a good season for them. So I think they have every right to celebrate.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, as you mentioned, it puts them level with Blackburn and Leicester on Premier League titles, but they have won, you know, 18 First Division titles. So it's sort of, it balances itself out that, you know, if people who were alive for those 18 First Division titles want to bring them up, then they can. But, you know, that's history. You know, what's going on at the moment, they've been one of the best teams in the world the last 2 years, 3 years if you want to stretch it back to the losing in the Champions League final to Madrid. And yeah, I mean, perhaps that deserves you a little bit of more respect from your opposition, but at the same time, it doesn't buy you a free pass and never being challenged by the other teams. I mean, Chelsea want to win a title as well next season, so there needs to be a bit of fire in the belly. Frank Lampard has to, you know, have that sort of competitive edge when he comes up against Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp.
yeah, I think obviously because of the lack of a gap, I guess, between this season and next season, I think that the current form at the end of this campaign will be quite telling, I think, for some of the way that teams will start the next one. Obviously, teams that are playing in European competitions will barely have any sort of break, depending on how far into the tournament they get. But I think I read somewhere that they're planning on starting the new season in September rather than August. So there could be a decent break there. Obviously, the transfer window is going until, late October. So that's going to be extended. So that could have an impact. I think, you know, it'll be the first time in a couple of years that we've had an active transfer window during the season. Of course, the past couple of campaigns, they've shut down the transfer window before the season starts, which I still think puts the Premier League at a disadvantage, but compared to the other European leagues, because obviously their transfer windows go on longer. So if a Premier League club loses one of their players to a European team, then they don't really have the means to replace that. But I mean, if we talk about the season as a whole, so it's not over yet. We have the final day of this. We have the final game day this Sunday, and depending on when this comes out, it might have already been played. But you'd probably have to say the Champions League is what most people are going to be looking out for. Obviously, I mean it's not as close as maybe it could have been, but who do you think is going to make that sort of Champions League spot? Well, I think Leicester potentially could. Well, Leicester are going to probably finish fifth. Let's be honest. Obviously, Man United and Chelsea in third and fourth, but it could all change on the final day. Any of those teams could finish 5th. And of course, Man United do play Leicester, I'm pretty sure, right?
Yep.
So if both of them draw, if they draw that game and Chelsea lose, Chelsea are into 5th now. So what do you think is going to happen?
I'm just glad you didn't mention that Chelsea are playing Wolves, Tom. Obviously, you could have shoehorned your club's importance in the Champions League race in there, but thank you for not. I think the fact United have that goal difference advantage on Leicester puts them at a massive advantage. Because unless they lose, they will finish above Leicester, which pretty much guarantees them 4th. Because I just don't see Leicester doing anything. So I really do think it depends on Chelsea's result as to whether they finish 3rd or 5th. If they win, I think they'll leapfrog United and Leicester. I can see that playing out into a bit of a stalemate, a 1-1 draw or something. But if they don't pick up any points or just a draw, then they've bottled it big time.
Yeah, I mean, I think unless Leicester do something which I wouldn't expect them to do and go and beat Man United by, a couple of goals, then I really don't think that they've got the chance. And I think it'll just stay how it is, the sort of the big 4, Man United, Man City, Liverpool, Chelsea. And I think they'll get the places. Unless Leicester do anything, I just don't think that, because I think they need, is it 1 or 2 points to get into the thing? And if they're playing United, they've got to pull off something quite incredible, but they might be up for it. We've seen Leicester go ahead and win the Premier League a couple of years ago. They might be up for it. They might think this is it. We've got to get that Champions League spot.
Yeah, personally, I mean, I'm very angry about the way that things have turned out. Mike Dean being Mike Dean has completely ruined our Champions League campaign. We're giving a ridiculous penalty away against Burnley. So I'm still really a bit fuming about that, to be honest, because if we'd have won that game, we'd be a point behind Leicester, we'd be 2 points behind Chelsea going into the final day, and now it's just like, it's a bit gutting, really, because even if we do beat Chelsea and Leicester lose, then it doesn't really make much of a difference. We'd be a point off Champions League, which is just like heartbreaking. But I'd probably have to say I think Man United and Chelsea will get it. I think Leicester will finish 5th. I think Leicester have dropped off massively since the turn of the year. They've just been in horrible form. And after they beat Crystal Palace, and obviously Vardy hit 100 goals, I actually wrote a little article on it saying that Leicester fans should still be worried because it was a good result, yeah, but it wasn't the norm. They were in a poor run of form, and Palace were terrible. They've lost their last 7 in a row. They're just in a shocking run of form. And can they pull something? United have been pretty disappointing their past 2 games, actually. Obviously, they got smashed by Chelsea in the FA Cup semi-final, and then drew with West Ham. So maybe could be a surprise there. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, it's a tough one to call, but yeah, I'd probably say Man United, to be honest. I think they just have a better team. Leicester just haven't really looked like the team that they were at the start of the year. I mean, let's not forget this Leicester team beat Southampton 9-0. And obviously it feels like a different season because it was so long ago almost. But it's quite astonishing to see how far they've sort of dropped off. I'm not sure what's really happened. Obviously, Jamie Vardy's goals have dropped in regularity a lot as well. So that's probably got something to do with it. But if we move on to surprise packages, then I think this is going to be a fairly obvious answer. But who has surprised you guys the most this season?
Sheffield United. Is that the answer you want? I mean, it's rare you see, obviously, Wolves aside, their first season up. It's rare you see a side come up and go toe-to-toe, take points off big teams without changing much. It's hard to, it's hard to think of another team that hasn't invested heavily when they've come up, has kept with players that were in the League One winning squad, and that I think all goes down to Chris Wilder and the fact that he didn't come up and think, okay, I maybe need to make a tweak here or, change something. Because speaking from, my own experience as a fan who comes up from a smaller club, not that first time, but when you've not been in and around it for a while. So the first time City were ever promoted, we did just go and spend heavily and really tried to up the ante and make our squad of the level of the Premier League, whereas Sheffield United have gone, this has won us 2 titles, this system has worked for us, let's just go and do it again.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with that. In Sheffield United would be the team that I'd say. I mean, they're in 7th, 8th position, completely sort of out of nowhere. I mean, they haven't. I wouldn't say they've been as strong since the restart after coronavirus, but certainly early season form was really good. I mean, also Burnley. I think I didn't expect them to do so well. I mean, they're in the top half of the table.
Yeah,
and I would have, if I would make predictions before the season, I would have put them down, maybe 14th, 15th place. And then another one that surprised me was, not potentially for the right reasons, but Norwich City, how they've only managed to win 5 games.
Yeah.
This entire season is nothing short of incredible, honestly. Fair play to them.
Yeah, to be honest, when they came up, I thought they'd finish top half because they played some really nice football in the Championship. No, don't lie. I genuinely thought they were going to be like a decent team, but then in the same sense, I also said that they do need to sort out their defence because although they won the Championship title, their defence wasn't that good for a title-winning side. So I think for me, I remember it was a really early podcast that I did earlier in the season that I said that I think they'd finish top half, but I could also see them struggling defensively because they just concede too many goals. And obviously that's sort of been the case for them. Timu Pukki stops scoring after 10 games in, and then after that it was just poor from them. Really, it was just shocking. It was quite sad to watch, to be honest, because the players just knew they were going to lose pretty much every single game. When you got Mikel Antonio scoring 4 goals against you, he's a good player, Mikel Antonio, but he's not a player that you concede 4 goals in one game against. I mean, come on, if he ever sees this, then I do apologise. But let's be honest, he's not that quality of player. But yeah, it's been a weird one. Do you think some of their players have got a decent chance of going to a Premier League club? Obviously, we're talking the usual names, sort of Cantwell, Buendia. I think Tim Krul gave a very good account of himself, actually. I think Tim Krul was definitely very decent for them. I think if it wasn't for him, they probably would have conceded more goals, which is crazy to think about. But is there any players there that you could see maybe getting a move back up?
I think they're the 3. The fullbacks as well, Max Aarons and Jamal Lewis. They are 2 quality young English fullbacks, so that immediately adds on a bit of market value to them, a bit of maybe another season and then they go somewhere. But I think Cantwell and Buendia, if they're going to get picked up, it has to be now. Another season in the Championship probably neglects the growth they can have. I think they've not shamed themselves this season. They've shown that they have a little bit of the quality needed to be Premier League footballers. I think Buendia probably has more value to him. I think he's a better player than Cantwell. I think the fact that he's not English probably takes off a few million from the price tag, but we'll see. I mean, they'd both be good squad players, rotation options for an Everton, an Arsenal, a Tottenham, the non-European football teams next season that want to push into them, because sometimes you look at those 3 and you think if they had another player to bring in and change the games for them when they've not got their big hitters playing, they'd be in a much better position. I think Tim Krul perhaps is just slightly too old. But again, as with like the top clubs, if you get a keeper of his quality and just sit him on the bench, he's perfectly adequate to come in and fill the void when needed.
Obviously, Ben Godfrey as well has been linked with a transfer. Why? It's a ridiculous rumor. I think it was Arsenal had been linked with him for 40 million for Ben Godfrey.
That's not too ridiculous. Harry Maguire went for 85.
Ben Godfrey. We're talking about a defender who played in the worst, well, one of the worst, probably the worst defense in the Premier League.
Yep.
No, 40 mil. I mean, come on. Let's behave a sec. I know he's English, but is he really that? He's not that good, is he? Come on, 40 mil.
I mean, it shows that when Hull City got relegated, Robertson went for 8 million to Liverpool and Maguire went for something like around the 10 million mark to Leicester. It's it's crazy that now teams who get relegated can ask for 40 million for their players, because I think we missed out massively on quite a lot of cash on those two boys.
We'll come on to that we'll come on to that later, because you missed out on a lot of money selling players. But I think for me the surprise package was probably Sheffield United. For me, it was either going to go horribly wrong or pretty well for them, and it's gone the other side. So I think they'll be slightly disappointed that they dropped off, because they were really in the mix for the Champions League at one point. I mean, they were a point behind United with the game in hand, and that hasn't quite worked out for them. So yeah, whether they actually improve next season is yet to be seen. They do have a decent squad, and they do have the ability to get good players as well. I mean, Sander Berg, obviously they signed him, so it shows that they do have some pulling power in terms of getting some, good players from around Europe. I'd actually think that, I'm not biased here, but I think Wolves are a bit of a surprise package. I thought we'd really struggle this year with the Europa League and the fact that we have such a small squad. I genuinely thought we'd be like sort of 10th, 11th, and I was going to be like, well, we'll take the hit and enjoy Europe this season, but we've managed to secure top 7 again. So
yeah, I mean, if we're throwing clubs in there that maybe didn't surprise us from a perspective of, suddenly overperforming from what we've seen, then I'd like to chuck in Southampton. I mean, they were beaten 9-0, lost a couple of more games on the bounce, and are now very comfortably in 12th position, I think.
11th.
That's an incredible recovery from that defeat. It's kind of crazy. I mean, you don't see many teams lose by that big of a goal margin and bounce back and recover from it, speaking from experience.
Well, I mean, Danny Ings as well has been a massive plus for them. I mean, what a rise he's had, Matt.
Yeah, no, he's been good. He's been one of their top players. I mean, he's been really crucial for getting those late goals. He's been doing wonders in my fantasy team, it has to be said. Can always rely on him for a goal each week. Yeah, he's been good. I think he's what, second or third highest goal scorer, is he?
Yeah, I think he's over 20 goals this year. This season for Southampton. He's always had it in him. I think he's always had that really good goal scorer in him. It just didn't really work out at Liverpool. He had loads of injury problems. He was really good at Burnley, obviously, before he's moved to Liverpool. So I think he's always had the talent in him. I think he just really needed something to just kick it off. And I don't know what it's been this season, but he's just, sort of, there's a spark that's been lit somewhere. And all of a sudden he's looking like the striker that we thought he was going to be 2-3 years ago. Let's not forget he didn't have the easiest start at Southampton either. I'm pretty sure he had a decent loan spell there, and then they signed him permanently. But it's good to see. And, another English player. I think England at the moment are very top-heavy. If you look at the amount of attacking players that we have, there's almost too much. You're talking Sancho, Sterling, Rashford, Ings, Greenwood, if he has another good season, could go to the Euros next year. Tammy Abraham, Callum Hudson-Odoi is sort of stalled a little bit. Bukayo Saka, he's still yet to choose his nation. There's so many young players. Dwight McNeil, if he has another good campaign, he could get a look in. There's almost too much for us at the moment. I think McNeil's English, or is he Northern Irish?
Yeah, he's English. I mean, my only thing is with that that entire thing you've just reeled off. For me, the worst one in there, or the least fitting for the England system under Gareth Southgate, is Harry Kane, and he's the absolute dead cert. Always going to, because he's the captain, he's always going to be in that team, in that front three, leading the line, and it almost needs for the Euros next year, if we're going to be successful and we're going to win it, for him not to be the captain, to have a terrible season, maybe even be injured for the tournament. And I hate to say that because I hate to, but that's our best chances. Because
gender against Harry Kane.
For me, no, but for me, the starting front three would be three players who can be fluid, flexible in their positions. And Harry Kane is just a number 9 up top, drops in to get the ball, plays in the two wingers. I'd rather have someone who's capable of playing on the break when necessary, holding the ball up. You know, bring Kane on when you need him. He's a goal scorer. He'll always be a goal scorer. But for the majority of the time, England try and play on the break, counter-attacking. You don't really need Harry Kane when you're trying to play that way. You've got Sterling, Sancho, Rashford, Ings, Abraham, so many other players who are better than him at doing that. And yet he'll be the one who starts. He'll wear number 9. He'll have the armband, and we'll go crashing out in the quarterfinals again.
I mean, what do you think England are missing? What do you think we need to improve?
Defenders.
Because I mean, midfielder.
We've got this sort of like attacking side, but we just like what's missing? What's going to get us to that World Cup final?
I think it's that classic thing with England is that we like to be sort of self-detrimental, but I think if we actually look through the squad and put in our best players, taking away like club who we support and stuff, you've got keepers who are Nick Pope's the top at the moment in the clean sheets. Yeah. Jordan Pickford plays the style that Southgate wants and seems to be better when he's in an England shirt than Everton one. And Dean Henderson, who's just had an incredible season for a newly promoted club. Then fullbacks on the right-hand side, we've got Trent, Aaron Wan-Bissaka. There's plenty of others behind them. Kyle Walker. I mean, yeah, we don't even talk about Kyle Walker anymore because he doesn't get picked. But he's, been a championship winner for the last 3 years. Left-hand side, there's a bit of a void. But if you're going on post-lockdown form, Luke Shaw, despite being overweight and everything else that goes with him, has looked decent, and of the left backs available is probably, for me, the best choice.
I'd probably go with Chilwell, to be honest.
Just a bit too slow, but he is decent. I mean, his post-lockdown form, his post-January form has been a bit questionable. Yeah. Perhaps the transfer moves around him. But then centre-backs, we've got Maguire and Joe Gomez, who I would start, and then you've got John Stones, plenty of others behind them who are capable defenders. Capable being the operative word. They're not, elite world-class ones. But midfield, I suppose, there's a void of maybe a defensive midfielder apart from Declan Rice. You've just got a lot of ball-playing midfielders and Jordan Henderson, obviously, who's an elite winning Premier League title. Yeah, whatever.
He won Football Writers Player of the Year, didn't he?
I don't mind him. He's a brilliant water carrier. I think they call that position. He can just take the ball and give it to someone else, and if that's what we want, then he's perfect for it. But yeah, I mean, we're obviously a year away, so we've got another season of these players playing at the top level. Some players who could suddenly burst onto the scene, like Greenwood has, like Rashford did 4 years ago. Who knows? I mean, we could be looking at a European Championship winning England squad in a year's time, or one that just bottles it and goes out in the group stages because of weighted expectations. I mean, who knows? It's all things to look forward to. There's Phillips at Leeds as well, who just occurred to me, who is a quality defensive midfielder. So, after a season in the Premier League, he could be in the England squad already. And, it's rare you see that from a newly promoted player, but if they're deserving of it, I'd rather they got the chance than just picking 23 players from the top 6 clubs.
Yeah, it's like you're saying. We've got, I think, almost too many attacking midfielders as well. We're talking, Jack Grealish, James Maddison, Mason Mount. I mean, so how do you fit all these players in? And, some players are going to miss out. And there's a question of picking the right player as well, the right personalities. Um,
I mean, they're not the club to emulate on every front, but why when we talk about having too many attacking midfielders, does that have to be a problem? I mean, you look at the best clubs in the world and they're not afraid to be attacking. And then I'm going to use United as the example. They look at their best when they've got Pogba and Bruno Fernandes playing together with 3 all-out attackers in front of them. And, you know, I don't see why we can't just try and emulate something similar. I mean, you know, you look through the United squad and you could probably pick a handful of the starters at the Euros from the United starting 11. So, you know, if you can just find someone to replicate Bruno Fernandes on set pieces, penalties, etc., and you can find someone with the personality and the physique of Paul Pogba, then you've got an England team ready to finish in the Europa League semi-finals. I don't know.
They don't make them like that in England, though, do they? Paul Pogba is very much the French sort of quota of big physical players. Most of them from African descent. I mean, a lot of them are from Paris, though, so it makes sense. But yeah, I think the Euros next year is definitely going to be interesting. I think England could have a very good team. I'm just worried about centre halves. I think if we had Connor Cody, we'd probably win the Euros, but that's just
Oil it.
No, I wouldn't have him in a back 2. I would never have him in a back back 4, I should say. I wouldn't have him as a 2 centre back partnership. He's a system player. I think as a middle centre half he works well, but not in a 2. So you mentioned Calvin Phillips. You mentioned Leeds. Let's get on to the Championship. Pretty crazy few final games in the Championship. I mean, where do we even start? Where do we actually start? We'll start with the relegation zone, shall we? Because there's been plenty of controversy surrounding the relegation zone. Of course, Wigan going down. That's been sort of the biggest story, I guess. Don't worry, Sam. We'll come on to Hull in a bit. But a real shame for Wigan. Obviously, 12-point deduction. They were very much in mid-table. But a 12-point deduction has seen them go down. Obviously, that's still yet to be, fully sort of. I think that there might be an appeal, but a very weird story. I don't know whether both of you have really seen much about the Wigan stuff. But for those who may be not sure what we're on about, of course, Wigan were taken over by a consortium of sorts, or Chinese owners. Was it Chinese or Thai owners?
Thai.
And one of the guys that was part of this sort of group, I think, had been a really famous poker player in Hong Kong. And apparently he put a bet on for Wigan to go down. It's a really complicated situation to me. I read an article about it on The Athletic, and I was still confused about what was really going on, because I think he'd owned shares in this company, and then a new company took them over. However, the company that took Wigan over had only existed since January, and he also had a majority sharehold in that company as well. And then obviously, as soon as they took over the club, within 5 days, they'd placed them into administration or something like that. So it's a really odd situation that's gone on there.
Yeah, they were struggling financially pre-coronavirus. I think that the lockdown masqueraded as the perfect reason to put them into administration. Oh, look, we have lost lots of money. Oh no, what a shame. My bet's going to come in. The EFL let this guy take over. I mean, first and foremost, there's the problem, is the EFL's fit and proper persons test is that they've managed to let another one. This isn't the first time. This is another one get through the net. And yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that they have to do extensive vetting and get these people to open up their checkbooks and show us how many times they've placed bets and who on and what on, etc. Because, clearly they're incapable of doing that. They've shown us that. So all it would have taken is you're a professional gambler, something sketchy about you being part of the ownership groups that's just owned them and now being part of the new one and effectively being the owner of Wigan and sort of this administration and everything else. Just, it was all a big stink. And I mean, they were bottom of the league at the turn of the year when we were 8th and Sheffield Wednesday were 3rd. And they just finished above both of us. We finished bottom and Sheffield Wednesday finished like 17th. They're just 2 clubs off the top of my head. The fact that they are now been relegated despite finishing 13th, they don't deserve it. The people who make up the club outside of the ownership group don't deserve it. It's literally just the people at the top in the boardroom who deserve that relegation, deserve the financial implications that come with it. I mean, I'm very glad that the administrators have found a potential new company to own Wigan. If they go to court and they appeal this decision to give them the points deduction and administration and everything else like that, I think it'll probably get overturned. I think there's been such a big stink about it, and these people who are buying Wigan are probably financially capable of keeping them afloat in the Championship. And so, all respect to Barnsley, they actually managed to stay up with Wigan's points deduction on the finals day. But I don't think anyone in the league outside of Barnsley fans will turn their head and, cry for them that Wigan have stayed up ahead of them, because Wigan don't deserve it at all. I mean, the other 2 in the bottom 3, Charlton weren't in there until the 91st minute on the last day of the season. And let's not talk about who else finished in the bottom 3. But, the only team that went down that don't deserve it at all whatsoever throughout the entire season are Wigan. So, it's time the EFL, I'm not saying fold it, let's not go extreme, but let's just actually stick a proper measure in the ground for this fit and proper persons test. I mean, joking aside, the fact that the new owners are going to have to go through that same test is just ridiculous. What's the point? We know it's terrible. Yeah. It's clearly a terrible test of the people who are going to buy a football club, because Wigan have just been put into administration by someone who went through that fit and proper persons test. The administrators have picked this lot. They're obviously not going to pick another professional gambler from Hong Kong who's got a bet on them going down from League 1 to League 2 next season, are they?
I think it's ridiculous. I've said this so many times. The EFL let their clubs down. They let Bolton down. They let Bury down. And the problem is it's almost like you're being punished for their own failings. It's like, well, we didn't conduct a proper fit and proper person owners test. So we're going to now punish the club financially because we made a mistake not checking these owners out properly. Macclesfield have obviously had serious money problems. And we've said this before. I think this is going to be a trend, especially over the next couple of years. I think more and more clubs are just going to fold because there's just not enough money in the Football League. There's such a disparity between the Premier League and the other leagues. It's inconceivable. The amount of difference in money is absolutely horrendous at points. And that's not to slight the Premier League. It's got the best clubs in the world that compete on the grandest stage, the best players, the most competitive league, really. So you can understand why we can't force feed people League Two football because it's just not the same quality. But I think that we are going to see a lot more clubs fold. And I think we could see a genuine restructure in the English Football League because of the amount of teams we could potentially lose. And that's not even talking about non-league. We're talking about semi-professional clubs that could go into the red because of, one, coronavirus, and two, because of just simply the lack of money.
I mean, I think when you've got the Premier League, which has got so much money, and that's kind of on the grand stage. It's got all this revenue. It's got all the broadcast. Then you've got the Championship, which is trying to get to that level. And because to get to that level, they need to invest money, but then they don't have as much revenue. And I mean, it just gets worse and worse as you go down. I mean, I feel as if at the bottom, in like League Two to the non-league clubs, it's perhaps not as much of an issue, but certainly the Championship, when it's kind of in between this really, really loads of money, expensive, and then sort of towards the bottom where there's like not as much like money in the game, it's kind of in this weird like middle area. And I mean, in terms of Wigan, you've got to feel sorry for the fans, because it's only going to hurt them. They're going down. And I think there's been attempts from like fundraising from fans as well to kind of keep things ticking along, and like players taking wage cuts and all this sort of thing. And then I think Wigan share their stadium with the Wigan Rugby League team as well. So I mean, the way that's going to impact the Rugby League team, because I think Wigan as a whole is quite a close knit community with their two big clubs, which is the Rugby League team who have won the Super League many times. And then the football, and I think they've got this really nice stadium, and when they potentially lose some revenue from Wigan Athletic, if they're having money problems, how is that going to impact the Rugby League team? Is that going to cause them any problems? And then the fans as a whole of both clubs, I mean, it's a really tricky one. I think the fans are the ones that lose out every single time through no fault of their own.
Yeah, like you said, I think the Championship is, I think, especially now, more so than before, it's in this weird sort of middle ground where there's a lot of money at the top of the Championship, but very little at the bottom. If you look at the teams that went up, for example, Leeds and West Brom, right? They can spend, 10 million on players. Whereas if you go to the bottom with clubs like Charlton, Barnsley, Luton, Hull, they're not going to spend that amount of money. There's such a big disparity, I guess. I mean, there is 24 teams, and there's a lot of, different levels of football club there. But yeah, I would agree with that in saying that it's a very strange league, the Championship. It is a cross between the Premier League and League One almost, in terms of money and the quality of teams. But if we talk about Hull as well, then one of the other teams that have had plenty of issues on and off the field, alongside Wigan, 25 defeats this season, the most of any team. 12 wins, 9 draws. So it's a pretty poor record, let's be honest. 45 points after 46 games, minus 30 goal difference. They lost their last 6 games with an aggregate score of, I think, around 19-3. Of course, including that ridiculous 8-0 defeat to Wigan. Talk us through it, Sam. You're the Hull fan. Obviously, not the most pleasant experience, but there, on a serious note, there is issues there that do need to be sorted out.
They go far beyond the fact that, there is financial imbalance in the Football League, and it goes far beyond anything that I can do justice. But I think that people know who Hull City are, and that they're a recognisable club, and that people can think of them as, well, they're a Championship club, they're a Premier League club, whatever. This shouldn't be happening to them, is both something that you can be very proud of as a Hull City fan, and something that can devastate you, because when we were last in League One, we'd never been above the Championship. And now, for the last 15 years, we spent almost half of that time in the Premiership. And, all right, 5 seasons or whatever it is out of 15 isn't, an elite performance. But this is a club that in 2010, after or while it was in the Premiership, went into administration. It was a club that 10 years before that had been locked out of its stadium, or 11 years before that was locked out of its stadium, doesn't own its own ground, doesn't take all of the revenue from that, has facilities that are, more traditionally thought of as lower league, and is in a rugby area. There's 2 rugby teams in one in each half of the city, and that the Premier League was even possible for us is, astonishing. I mean, we have to remember where we came from. This is a club that, spent the majority of its time in Division 2, 3, some of it in Division 4 before the restructuring of the Football League after the Premier League's foundation. And, the Alams, when they took over the club, saved it, right? They did, and put us through our best ever spell. But it's the fact that they've said since 2014 the club is for sale. We know that people have been trying to buy it, trying to take it off their hands, and every single time they tell them it's worth more than they're being offered, or they scam whoever is trying to buy it into thinking that there's another buyer who's going to give them more, so that they pull out. And for people who claimed to be buying Hull City and saving them for the love of the city, the fact that they had, that Hull had been their home since Assem Alam fled Egypt in the 1960s as an asylum seeker in the area, it's clearly not the case. It was a financial decision. They knew there was money there that they could do. They annoyed a club legend. I mean, Nick Barmby was City manager in 2011-12, taking over from Nigel Pearson, and they decided that he was the man to annoy, to frustrate, and then sack, because he spoke out in the paper against them for the fact that they weren't willing to spend money. Gave Steve Bruce the job. Okay, there's a turning point there. Suddenly we go through our best ever spell because they've changed manager and put someone much higher caliber than lower mid-table championship club. We had an FA Cup final, we had a European spell, but this season has just been that straw you were waiting to pull out. Is the final one. Everything has collapsed. They hired a League One standard manager with a League One caliber squad with 2 players who were above that, who managed to drag us until the end of January into the top half of the table. I mean, that Jared Bowen is capable of still playing football for West Ham despite the back injury that he must have is phenomenal, because he genuinely since he left, since Grzycki left, 1 win, 3 draws. That's it. 6 points. 4 games we picked up points in since they left. Probably since the start of January, because I don't even think we had a good January. And they replaced them badly with League One caliber footballers. I saw a piece in the local paper, which was from someone else's tweet, that in the last 10 years or in the last 5 years or whatever time frame, £60 million worth of signings have left on a free.
Yeah.
And City have made no profit on, have barely made a profit, like 30 million profit on all of Steve Bruce's signings. I mean, and that's 8 million for Robertson, 12 million for Maguire when they were signed for 4 million between the pair of them. Yeah. The sales that were made to make that a profit, and the fact that they've lost all of that money in players who've left on a free, just goes to show that these are not good businessmen in charge, despite the fact that they said at the start of the season we were the best run club in the EFL. Where's the proof of that? They said in January, before they sold Bowen and Grzycki, that they were keeping hold of them because we were going to make the playoffs and we were going to be back in the Premier League. 2 weeks later, they've both gone and we're just starting our decline down the table. But when we sold them and replaced them with poor quality, the thought of Hull City being relegated was a myriad. It was, in the worst case scenario, we will finish 1 place above it, because we will pick up at least the bare minimum points. And we did pick up the bare minimum points. We picked up 6. I mean, there was no foresight for the fact that actually this is not a good squad. Our highest paid player was Kevin Stewart on 17 grand. Meanwhile, in negotiations with other players, the maximum they were willing to go to was between £4,000 and £6,000. I've said it before on other shows, etc., but there is not another club in the Championship whose highest paid player is probably is seven. Like, it's just not feasible that every other club in the Championship is offering between 4,000 and 6,000 to the highest paid players, and 17 grand is the top paid player. You've probably got six other clubs where 17 grand is the top paid player. After that, at some clubs, that'll be the average wage. I'd love to see the average wage at Leeds, West Brom, to understand how 17 grand fits in. I mean, I saw some tweets about Kevin Stewart. I actually quite liked him. I thought he was a decent player, but he played like 86 games or something in his 4 years, so it was a tiny amount of games. And so the cost of him for £8 million, plus all of his wages, etc., for every game, we were effectively paying 90 grand for every single game he played. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
It all comes down to recruitment at the end of the day. And, there's definitely plenty of problems for Hull and Wigan to sort out. But if we move on to a more positive aspect of the Championship, an absolutely fascinating playoff and promotion push. Of course, West Brom very nearly and probably should have been knocked out of the automatic promotion places by Brentford. Obviously, it's a bit bittersweet for me because it's like, well, Black Country Derby next year, but also, no Wolves fan would really want West Brom to go up. But we get a derby next year. But difficult times for Brentford. They've lost their last couple of games, so they're going into playoffs with bad momentum. Swansea, on the other hand, somehow, I think this was probably the story of the weekend. So Nottingham Forest, 6th place, Swansea in 7th or 8th, and there needed to be a 6-goal swing for Swansea to make it. And of course, Nottingham Forest lost 4-1 to Stoke. Swansea won 4-1, and that 6-goal swing happened. And so Swansea are into the playoffs for having a +1 better goal difference than Nottingham Forest. I'm a little bit annoyed because I kind of wanted Forest to go up this year. So that's not going to happen now. I do hope Brentford go up. They've always been in and around that sort of playoff area, and they were really close to automatic this year. But if we talk about Leeds and West Brom, how do we think these two teams are going to do next year? Lots of people, I think, are excited to see Leeds back. Very big club, European pedigree. They've been through some rough times, poor ownership, money problems, but they're back in the Premier League with an iconic manager in Marcelo Bielsa. Let's not forget that this man influenced Pep Guardiola, Mauricio Pochettino, to name a couple of managers. Very influential manager, and an interesting team as well. Apart from Patrick Bamford up front, we'll have to see how that works. But how do you reckon they'll do? Do you think that they could be a welcome addition to the Premier League?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think the buzz around the city as well. I mean, the fans have been. I mean, there was all sorts going on when I was back over in Leeds, and fans outside, like 3 cars got smashed up and all sorts of stuff happening, kicking off everywhere. But yeah, I think it's going to be exciting to see. And I don't really foresee them going down either. I see them kind of finishing mid-table. And I think they'll do all right, because I think they've got a lot of good players, and I think they've got a good ethos in the club, and I think they've got that kind of like buzz, that kind of like momentum, especially with it being like so long and it being such almost like a bit of a meme that it's just like Leeds are falling apart again. But this time they've got it right with the new management structure that they've got in place, and then bringing Bielsa in, obviously, in his team. Then everything's worked for them really this season, and it's gone well. They've got good players like Pablo Hernandez. He's been really crucial, especially after this after lockdown. He's been a really key part in giving them that final push to get to the end.
What would you say about them, Sam? Would you reckon that they're sort of one of those teams that could really push for the sort of the top half?
They're better than Sheffield United. Arguably, they play better football than a lot of teams in the Premier League. So I foresee, a good season for them. Do I want that to happen? Probably not. But it's going to, and they're going to have a very good season. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they pushed for Europe the way Sheffield United have. Their system can be found out more easily, but then it's actually playing against it that becomes, the obstacle. And
Yeah.
we've look at Man City. I mean, they're a far better squad and playing squad than Leeds, but nobody can really contest with their style of play. So I'd imagine that Leeds are going to spend a fair amount and are going to be successful.
Well, I mean,
They deserve it. They do deserve it. As much as, we can be petty and bitter as rival fans, they deserve a shot at this, and, good for them.
they've been linked with Edinson Cavani already. Now that would be some signing if they pulled that off. I'm not sure how FFP would rule that with the amount of wages that he's going to be on. But if they escape with a £10 million fine, then who cares? I actually sort of worry for them a little bit in the goals department because their chance conversion rate is not the best. And Patrick Bamford, whilst he got around 20, I think he got 20 plus goals this season. There's a lot of fans that are saying we don't, they're not clinical enough. Leeds need to be clinical. They're not going to get as many chances in the Premier League as they did in the Championship. So they need to make sure that they are more clinical this year. Otherwise, they're going to struggle. I think defensively, they're solid, really. I don't see many issues with them defensively. They've got some really good young players. Ben White, I think is his name, on loan from Brighton. Really, really, really promising young centre-half. I'm really excited to see how he does. They've just signed Meslier, who's a young goalkeeper as well. He's supposed to be decent as well. Came in for Kiko Casilla after the Spaniard was racist. So
yeah, just say it. He was racist.
He was a racist. He's a racist guy. So hopefully they release him.
They won't.
They won't, but it would be a good gesture if they did, because there's no place for it anywhere. So, but I'm looking forward to it. Bielsa is an interesting manager because he hasn't won a lot. If you look at his career, he's not actually been that successful. But I think it's his influence on other managers that has made him such a big name. And the fact that a bit like Arsene Wenger, when Arsene Wenger came to England and he introduced a new style of play, that's what Bielsa did with Argentina. And Chile. No, I think it was Chile. Yeah, he did it in Argentina, and he helped. I think he managed Chile as well, if I'm right in thinking. So it'll be interesting to see how he does. I'm personally excited. I think it's a good club to have in the Premier League. Excellent fan base. You're going to get some great away days out of that. Obviously, Leeds Man United, a classic rivalry. Do you know what? I think next season's going to be a lot of fun. I think Bournemouth. If we touch on the relegation place, if we're talking about promotion, we might as well talk about the Premier League relegation battle. I'd say Bournemouth are probably down. I'd imagine you guys would probably agree with that. I mean, they're 3 points adrift.
Yeah, they're done.
And obviously, that's between Villa and Watford. So it's a tough one. It's a tough one. Who do I want to go down? Troy Deeney's Watford or Aston Villa? It's a tough choice because, I mean, Wolves fans, we don't really like Watford all that much because of last year. So it'd be quite funny to see them go down. But then obviously Aston Villa, another West Midlands team. But at the end of the day, they're a big club. They've got a good fan base. Again, it's nice to have the biggest clubs. You want the biggest clubs in the Premier League. You don't want Norwich. You don't want Bournemouth. No offence to those clubs, but they're not Premier League clubs. Let's be honest. If you could remove Bournemouth and have Leeds, you would remove Bournemouth and have Leeds, wouldn't you? You want the best.
Literally. I mean, in terms of fan base, I mean, I think I might have said this before, but Bournemouth have less seats in their stadium than Leeds United did have cardboard cutouts first game back after coronavirus. Like, to me, that's a crazy stat when you think about it. Like, it really just shows the size of the fan base for Leeds United. I mean, they I saw a comparison between all of the I think it was Twitter posts of the clubs announcing that they'd won like all the Bundesliga winners, the Serie A winners, etc., and all of them. And Leeds United had like the most likes, retweets, and like everything on all of their posts by like a factor of two. Even like Liverpool, they were like it had so much more traction than any of the other stuff that they've done. So, I mean, I think it really just shows how big a club Leeds United is and how much of a good thing that is for the Premier League to have them back.
I personally can't wait, to be honest. I think that do you know what? There's been a recent trend, I think, in the past couple of campaigns. Promoted sides are getting better and better and better. I think before it was very much the case of, even, like 5-6 years ago, the bottom three would usually have at least two, if not all of the promoted sides, because there was just such a big gap. And a lot of teams that came up struggled. But now you've seen it with Sheffield United, Crystal Palace. They've not really struggled too much since they've got promoted. Burnley are now solidifying themselves as a Premier League team. You've got Sheffield United and Wolves that are pushing in the top 7, 8 after a couple of seasons. Leeds, I think, could be another one of those teams that does pretty well. So at the end of the day, you've got to think about promoted sides now are a lot better than they were 5-6 years ago, when you'd probably just pick most of them to go back down again, which I think is good. I think it's good. It mixes up the Premier League. I think if Villa stay up, I genuinely think that we'll have one of the better Premier Leagues than we've had for the past few years, because let's be honest, Watford, Bournemouth and Norwich, is the Premier League really going to miss them? Not necessarily. They're sort of like, they're just sort of there. They don't have massive fan bases. They don't have the sort of the caliber of clubs that you'd want in the Premier League. And, it does sound harsh, but they're not massive clubs. And I think that if people want a good Premier League, then we're going to need, you want clubs that have got that sort of fan base behind them, excluding West Brom, obviously. No one really cares about them apart from West Brom fans. I saw a tweet that was quite funny, actually. It's like, no one is happy that West Brom are going up except West Brom fans, because they're not very good. So easy 6 points next year, and hopefully we can get our 6 points and they can go back down to the Championship and we can enjoy Champions League football. Hopefully, if all goes well and we don't lose half of our team. Now let's move on to the last couple of points then. Predictions for next season. Let's go. Let's have a look. So let's just assume that Watford are going down, because let's be honest, they probably are. We'll stick with the table as it is. So the season finishes today. This is how it finishes. Who do we think will go up in the playoffs? Brentford, Fulham, Cardiff or Swansea? Which one of those teams are we going for? Brentford. Should we go Brentford maybe?
Yeah, I think Brentford, yeah.
I think Swansea.
I hate Fulham, so they're not going up.
Yeah. We've already heard your many rants about the London clubs, and I don't think we want to hear those clappers again in the Premier League. So next season, what's going to happen? Premier League title. Who are we saying? Man City.
Yeah.
Man City, really? I think Man City. Champions League. I think top four will probably be Man City, Liverpool, Chelsea, United. I think that's
the
pretty
same
fair.
as this season.
I would go similar.
They're all going to improve. They've already got decent squads. Chelsea have got a tasty looking front line, but their defence is just questionable. They need to replace Marcus Alonso, and they could probably do with a world class centre half and a goalkeeper. So they could buy as many Kai Havertzes as they want. If they can't defend, it's not going to make a difference. Then if we're talking Europa League, so 5th to 7th, let's say, I'm probably going to go with Everton, Wolves. Arsenal, Spurs, Wolves. I think that they're very much... I think they'll have a comeback year. I think
Arsenal, Leeds, Tottenham.
Whoa, Leeds. Mm-hmm. That's a big shout. What about you, Matt?
No, I'm not on the Arsenal. No. I think Tottenham, just Arsenal, they've looked dreadful, absolutely dreadful since we've come back, since the restart. And then, I think maybe one of those clubs like possibly a Leeds, maybe a Burnley, maybe I don't know, for my own sake, a Newcastle maybe, who knows.
I think, do you think Liverpool will be as dominant next season? I don't think so. I'd probably say that this was sort of a one-off season for City more than it was for Liverpool. Liverpool were very good. Don't get me wrong, fantastic, 96 points, amazing. But City were also very poor by their standards. I mean, 78 points I think they're on. That's just terrible for their squad, really. Can Arsenal and Tottenham challenge for top four? No. Of course, the promoted sides, if we're talking West Brom, Leeds and Brentford, possibly. Obviously, we're taking a big gamble saying that Brentford are just going to go up, but especially going into the playoffs in poor form. But I think Leeds, top 10. I'm not as risky as you, Sam. 7th, nah. Top 10, I think Leeds.
Is it 6th?
If they can get a clinical striker, if they can get a clinical goal scorer, then I think they will. But they need to be more clinical. I think Brentford could stay up. They play good football. So, and if they can keep Saeed Benrahma, then he's very much the sort of the Adel Taarabt of the modern day. He's just too good for the Championship, but can he do it in the Premier League? And then who else? West Brom, bottom. What about you guys?
Yeah, I think West Brom are going to struggle, and I think we might be looking at someone like a Brighton as well, being down there in the relegation zone as well.
Yeah, Brighton and Palace.
In my opinion, they've just not looked good this season.
I would probably say my bottom three for next year: West Brom. I'd probably agree with Brighton. Palace, if they keep Hodgson, I think they could struggle. So it really depends on if they sack him and go for someone else. Really, I don't know. It's going to be a tough one, but exciting end to the season, and next season is so close. And of course, we will have more Planet Sport because the Europa League and Champions League are coming back. One-legged ties, all in the same place. Royal Rumble. Let's go. I'm excited for this format. I don't think Wolves are going to win it, by the way, if anyone thinks I'm biased. We've got Sevilla or Roma if we beat Olympiacos. I can't see us getting past Sevilla or Roma, but you never know. Right, that's pretty much it. That's all we've got time for. Good discussions. I think I think many people will be excited for next year, especially with us covering it. I think that gives you just that little bit of extra professional and comedic into the Premier League. Get ready for lots of banter next year.
That's
Great
the one. In person banter.
Yeah, in-person banter. When we're actually in the studio and I can throw cider cans around if Wolves lose. So yeah, let's just pray that Wolves don't lose to West Brom, because I might do the show with a hangover to cure my sadness. So
it's also hope they've got a high chair for you, Tom. Otherwise, you'll be spending your entire time looking upwards.
Get out! Ridiculous! I've been ruined already. Just you wait. I'm gonna buy a pair of stilts, and no one will know the difference. I'm not even good stilts as well. The plastic ones with the little ropes that you used to wear in reception. That you just struggle to
little buckets.
Yeah, the little upside down buckets. Yeah, just you wait. I'm pointing at you. Disgraceful. Dan, put some editing or something. Just put some clapping in or something. That was a really funny joke. Right, anyway, thank you for watching Planet Sport. We'll be back soon. Until then, take care.
See you later.